Engineer versus Designer is brought to you by the Mojo 3D printer. Now you can have 3D printing right at your desktop at a remarkably low cost. With the magic of Mojo, there's really no limit to your creativity. See it at mojo3dprinting.com.
Adam, if design were a hoagie roll, you'd be a barbecue roast beef sandwich with extra horseradish and no meat.
So delicious. Welcome to Engineer vs. Designer,
A podcast
for product designers,
engineers,
mean pigs,
angry birds,
and people who start crowd-powered product development firms. My name is Adam.
Yes, and my name is Josh. Adam, you know that idea I told you about last week?
Let's see. You wanted to find out if grape jelly functions as sunscreen by rubbing it all over your pasty white body and lying out in the Texas sun.
Yep, that's the one. Well, it didn't work.
Sadly, I kind of thought so.
It was so bad.
I'm a little
really
shocked.
Bad. Blisters. But see, here's the thing. While treating the second degree burns covering 99% of my pasty body, I had a different idea for a new kind of pillow for people with limited neck mobility, like you.
Awesome. That sounds fantastic.
This week, we have the great honor to speak with John Jacobsen, head of engineer at social product development site Quirky, where I can submit my product idea, and if enough people like it, Quirky will develop the product for market.
Using the crowd, of course, for feedback along the way.
Yep, sell it at Target or other retail outlets and give me royalties for my amazing, incredibly awesome contribution.
Which means that, of course, the grape jelly incident of 2012 will not be in vain.
Roll the tape.
Roll it.
Yeah, now for the important question to start off with. If you had the choice between extruding marshmallow peeps into any shape and color you wanted for the rest of your life, or having a walking 5-foot-tall Arduino Jolly Rancher robot named Linus that talks in Morgan Freeman's voice, which would it be? Is the longest question.
Yeah, that's the serious question.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to go with Linus.
Yeah. He needs to exist. Well, okay. So, John Jacobsen, what is Quirky's elevator pitch?
Quirky's elevator pitch. Quirky is a social product development company, and so what that means, we are sort of the best of a social network plus a product development company. We are an online platform for people from around the world to submit their ideas to us. Those ideas are curated. The top ideas are rated, voted, selected, again, based on the community plus Quirky staff. And, the ones that sort of make it through the process, the ones that are good and interesting and unique to the marketplace, we develop further. We put them online. Again, if there's traction and interest, and people sort of respond based on their interest and whether they're willing to pay for it or not, we develop those products. We bring them to market. And once we do, everyone that participated in that product's sort of development cycle, participating from the original inventor to all the hundreds or thousands of people that participate just in decision-making, collaborating around the world, share in the royalty every time that product is sold in the retail space, whether it's through Amazon.com or whether it's through Target.
Mm-hmm. Now, usually when people think about social product development, the first thing that comes to mind is something like Kickstarter. So how would you differentiate Quirky from Kickstarter for somebody with an idea for, let's say, a new kitchen gadget or an iPhone accessory?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. And I think, fundamentally, Kickstarter is a fundraising platform. And fundamentally, Quirky is a product development platform. So at our core, at the core of Kickstarter, if you look at sort of its roots and its history, it really is about funding art films and artists, and it's very much sort of has its roots in that sort of space. Yes, more recently there have been some very well-known examples and some foray into product development, but essentially it's a fundraising entity. It's not bringing you all of the resources you need to develop the product. And I think it's been very evident in a lot of cases where products sort of stall out. They become very delayed in the cycle of actually developing them because, the fundraising part is, and not to sort of knock it, but it's sort of the easy part. the product development, engineering, all of the rest, the finite element analysis, the sourcing, the materials, figuring out where every O-ring and every gasket and every screw goes. That's the hard part in the equation. And for us, Quirky is sort of doing all of that heavy lifting for the ideator, for the average person out there with a not-so-average idea.
Right. Now, I mean, and that's really interesting, and we're going to talk a little bit more later about the fact that you come from product design consulting. That's your background. And I think that's what's so interesting about Quirky is that you're kind of taking a traditional product development firm and then mashing that up with a co-creative kind of process. And it's something that's pretty unique out there on the market. Now, you're head of engineering at Quirky. What does the head of engineering at Quirky do?
Well, at Quirky, it's a little quirky. Our office is pretty chaotic, and we kind of do everything. We're still somewhat of a startup, even though we're 3 years in. But my role really is to sort of handle the more hardcore part of product development. So our process is sort of split into three components. There's sort of the ideas come in, and as they are selected, they are developed to a certain point and sort of brought to life and launched on the website as what we call upcoming products. That, for the most part, is done by our industrial design team with consultation from the engineering team. But to some degree, those products have not been fully realized. They're not fully developed. They're not fully engineered. They're brought to a point that's interesting enough to excite people, and for us to be able to sort of render and use photography to sort of complete the story. But that's the first part of the process of just bringing them to life and kind of launching them to the world as an upcoming product. If and when those products are selected, sort of green light, we're going to make them based on different factors, whether the community at large or the world at large sort of is interested, or retailers are interested, or we see that there's a market opportunity and we want to move a product forward. That's when sort of my group, sort of the engineering, the design engineering team, et cetera, kind of gets involved, and we kind of take it. Yeah, and exactly where the rubber meets the road. We kind of go back to the drawing board a little bit. We address design, we address engineering, we address, if it's a structural product, we'll do some FEA. If it's electrical product, we'll involve and engage electrical engineers. We'll do prototyping and testing. We sort of do then the very traditional sort of product development process that most people are familiar with. So that's kind of my piece of it, is really that hardcore, is really at the end of the day what has to leave our department is sort of the perfected manufacturable design that essentially is going to go to the vendor for them to make.
You guys are releasing something like 2 products a week, right? That's just insane in any sort of environment. What does a typical day look like for you?
Typical day these days is it's pretty crazy. It can range from multiple interviews because we're hiring like crazy. So I'll have interviews throughout the day with candidates, prospective candidates. I'll be writing up job descriptions for new hires. I'll be working on probably 5 different products, and they'll be in different stages of design and development.
Wow.
And then I do a little bit of speaking for Quirky, so I'm out on a circuit sometimes, kind of at different conferences. So I'm picking and choosing which conferences I can go to.
Good grief.
Yeah, and then it's quite.
And then you come home and
never a dull moment.
You enjoy a nice Valium before bed. So,
a bottle of wine.
Right.
Straw. Yeah.
Now, John, have you ever submitted an idea to Quirky yourself? How does that work?
So it's interesting. So Quirky, as far as at least how it is sort of structured, it's kind of like those sweepstakes. It always says the employees are not eligible to win. So interestingly enough, the Quirky staff members cannot submit ideas or vote on anything in the way that the community can. So we're kind of here to serve our community of 200 plus thousand. But we have had in the past, though I will say, on occasion, we do what we call a staff submission round. So we have done that before. And it was sort of, where the roles are reversed. So it's basically Quirky staff is sort of submitting their ideas to some degree anonymously as best as possible, so that Quirky staff members don't know whose ideas are who. And we let the community sort of vote and rate on them. And then at the end of the day, it's in a similar fashion. It's sort of, again, it's a collaborative effort in terms of picking and choosing. So there were some that were chosen, and actually last year I did have a product that was chosen. So my idea was chosen to move forward. It is actually in production and in the stores in Target. It's a really silly product. It's called the Broom Stopper, and it's you put it on the broom to sort of stop it from sliding off a counter and falling onto the floor. So I don't know if that's ever happened to you before, but
yes, ingenious. I'm going to
it's
Target
a funny little
after
product.
So what's your personal favorite product ideas submitted to Quirky?
One of them that came through recently just really grabbed my attention, and maybe it's because I'm like an old school kind of car guy and I like pickup trucks and just utilitarian things, was this kind of like the reinvention of those old, well, they probably still exist, but like a military shovel, these sort of, and sometimes there's a really crazy, I think it's a crazy YouTube video out there of this Asian one that where basically they demonstrate you can do like 120 different, perform 120 different acts with this, multi-functional shovel. And I think those products are really cool. And so it was really about the idea of not purely from sort of, what you might need in the field, like for a military product, but was more like everyday sort of in your car kind of tool that would be for snow or for helping you out of, if you were stuck, or, just giving you a little bit more
the
muscle
Swiss Army shovel
in certain cases. So exactly, the Swiss Army shovel that looks cool in your trunk and doesn't scare people.
So is Quirky making taking any initiatives towards sustainable manufacturing and or business practices?
It's kind of tricky. We're still a young company, so it's kind of hard to get everything in line, right out of the gate. I think we are getting better and smarter at being more responsible. Some of that comes in the form of made here, is sort of our new campaign. So we're trying to make more things in the U.S. So one of our recent programs, which is called Crates, which is like the reinvention of the milk crate as a storage and sort of furniture solution. That entire program is made here in the U.S. And in Vermont, in fact, at a beautiful manufacturing facility in Vermont. And for us, that's it's one step towards something that maybe is a little bit more sustainable or feels right in the sense that you're not shipping things around the world. And we're working with local, supporting local, trying to use good materials, things that are recyclable, and so forth. I think the other side of it, I remember years ago I worked with, Smart and OXO, and OXO's story was kind of interesting from a sustainability point of view, was that their products not necessarily were the most perfect in terms of, sustainable stories, like this rubber overmolded on plastic is not the greatest, but from their point of view, these were products that you hold on to, they last 10 years, they last 12 years, so they're sustainable in that respect. And I would say we're kind of in a similar zone. We're trying to do right by our inventors, and we're trying to build better products and not just sort of just crank out, some flash in the pan kind of plastic stuff. So.
Okay, now what everybody wants to know, what's the secret for getting a project funded on Quirky?
The secret?
Yes.
Well,
there's a code word, right? There's a special
interestingly
password. You have
enough.
to put it in the body of the submission, and you guys read it. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah.
It shouldn't suck.
Well, yeah, that always helps. If it's a killer idea, it works. So interestingly enough, I mean, in terms of getting ideas through to Quirky, I think it does come down to sort of just old-fashioned, if it is inventive, meaning it is sort of unique and it really captures our attention, and the world's attention, then it's it always helps when it's in that space. If it's small and incremental improvements over something else, I mean, those are more challenging. In terms of articulating an idea, I think people that are able to sort of do that with a combination of sketches and renderings, even prototypes and video, quality video. I've seen that recently, and it's kind of the Kickstarter model where you have to have this killer HD video produced.
Good old-fashioned salesmanship helps. It always helps. Yeah.
Yeah, and it works. I have to say it works. It's a really great way to sort of get people engaged. It demonstrates that you've probably put a little bit more thought into this. You have a prototype. You're demonstrating everything there live. It works. It tells a story, and it convinces us that you've put some time and energy into it. I don't want to dismiss the napkin sketches and sort of the crazy napkin sketch ideas, because sometimes those have a seed or a kernel that we are able to sort of transform into a product.
But it always helps to be able to communicate really clearly what the idea is in a more salesmanly fashion, I guess. Can be
definitely
an advantage.
And part of it is because humans are sort of our attention span these days, it's like the age of distraction.
Right.
So the more things you can do to engage people and really and grab their attention, and I think currently it seems that film is sort of still the medium of choice that does that still.
Now let's switch it up a little bit. You have a bachelor's and a master's degree of an MS in manufacturing engineering. At what age did you decide you wanted a career in engineering, and what how did you get there?
I think for me, I was always sort of working with my hands, and I was surrounded with people that were also equal, very capable of working with their hands. More trade related stuff, welders and people working with glass and automotive mechanics. So I kind of just was naturally gearing up for something sort of more technical. I loved math and science. Equally, I had this very creative side, which when I was sort of getting ready to sort of decide where to go and what to do, it was a little bit perplexing. I was thinking I should go to art school, and I had this sort of grandfather figure who was who had been from math and science, and I think he won out. I don't regret it, I think, at all, because like I said, I think it's just a great way to sort of develop a mind. It's not, it doesn't mean that you're not creative. It doesn't mean that you're only analytical. But yeah, I would say, as I got closer to sort of this, the sort of turning point of, okay, I need to go off to school now and do something that makes sense. I think I chose engineering. And I went up to the Boston area, and it was a great experience for me. It was a great opportunity to sort of, Boston was a great city. It was a great place to go to school. It had an urban feel, but it was very manageable. And it was a great university, really well funded, really well managed. Yeah.
Right on. Well, you worked with Smart Design in New York. Very cool company. How did the design and engineering experience at a firm like Smart help you or prepare you to guide others in creating their own iconic designs? And then, like, on the other hand, how did it not?
Yeah, my experience with Smart Design, I think, was instrumental in sort of developing my sort of, they're sort of really known for
your
this
spider sense.
Yeah, my spider sense. The user-centric, centered design and universal design. So some of these sort of core sort of principles of really what good design is about. Understanding, today it's sort of common practice, and if you read everyone's website that's a design firm, they all kind of sound the same. But the multidisciplinary approach, the sort of user-centric approach, the universal design, like those sort of core pieces, I think, is really what I learned by working with Smart, and at Smart.
And how did it not help you? What kinds of things did you learn at Smart that aren't applicable anymore in this situation?
Yeah, interestingly enough, this whole idea of keeping a community of 200,000+ people engaged and interested in what we're doing means we have to move really fast. It's, to have a 2-year development cycle on a product, that doesn't cut it when you're trying to keep, the inventors and the contributors, the influencers engaged. So I would say the SMART process was very thorough, very methodic, very beautiful, and hard to argue with because, lots of success stories. But at the same time, our business model is different. And so therefore our process and our behind the scenes process, when you pull back the curtain,
that's right. You want a different product. You got to use a different process. And so, speaking of engaging people, how do you think Quirky is going to shape the consumer mindset, especially with kid makers? Do you think that efforts like Quirky are going to help win the hearts and minds of kids for engineering and design in the future?
I think so, and I think because I think it's human nature for people to want to be able to create things or to alter their environment, to have control over their environment. So I think it's very natural. I think there just hasn't really been a great conduit or an outlet for people to do that. There's the few examples, people who are well connected or well funded, and they're able to kind of get their ideas through. The Scott Wilsons of the world on Kickstarter, that's extremely unique. That's someone who is a professional who has all the connections. So for him to raise some money is easy, and then he knows what to do with it. The average person and young people alike, I think, again, have the same desire, but I think they're looking for a trusted outlet, and I think Quirky is that trusted outlet. And again, we're open in the sense that we're not we're open to all ideas, the spectrum, whether it's the napkin sketch or the full-on prototype, patented, 3 years of my life invested. So we're open to that entire spectrum.
So what advice would you give to kid makers and their parents who want to get their product ideas made out there?
I think some of it is sort of keep it simple, focus on what you know. If you're passionate about something, chances are, that's going to help. You're going to bring a lot to the table, and you're going to be able to sort of defend your idea and feel strong, get behind it. And I think that's important. And again, as far as articulating it and keeping it simple, and you can look around and it's very easy to sort of learn. You can look at companies that you admire. You could look at an Apple and say, how do they do it and what works? And, what elements of that do I want to sort of incorporate in what I'm offering? So I think there's lots of data out there, and it's a matter of learning to see, and then it's again a simple message, articulate things in a simple way, and again it's that sales, like we talked earlier. I think the sales side of it is selling it. It's selling your idea. If your sketch looks, or your rendering or your photograph looks awful or has some weird stuff in it, it's no different than how people on Etsy or something, are educated on how to present their work. There is a way to do it that makes that, one is better than the other. And I think it's no different than when you're sort of pitching an idea or some new invention.
Nice.
Well, John Jacobsen, having you on the show has been even better than that time I watched Josh eat an entire can of baked beans with chopsticks. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you, guys.
All right, man. See ya.
Thanks, John. I am so glad to hear that. Keep it simple. Focus on what you know.
Which is the exact opposite advice you usually give people, Josh.
Yeah, I learned a lot when functionality testing that dart gun, I'll have you know.
You have children, for God's sake.
Yeah, they love me, too.
If you'd like to send mechanical launching apparatuses to EVD HQ, apparati, who knows, please address them to Josh.
I promise I'll use them to annoy Adam and his hairless cat. Let us know what you think about the show, what sound effects or guest effects you'd like to hear. Leave sarcastic, comical, or melodramatic song lyrics and comments at EngineerVsDesigner.com. Do it now.
Also, if you want to see us co-create a tweet out of rice pudding and random yet inspirational quotes, be sure to like us, +1 us, tweet us, or whatever else us, so you are sure to be in on the intense awesomeness that will ensue.
Yes, this show is edited by Simon Martin. Our theme music is by Ross Hartman.
We'll see you next week, and remember, it's not the size of the engineer in the design. It's the size of the design in the engineer?
It's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog. Unless it's a small engineer.
Oh, gotcha.
Look out! Engineer vs. Designer is brought to you by Mojo 3D Printer. a world-class professional 3D printer for only $185 a month. To find out how you can give your big idea a little mojo, visit mojo3dprinting.com.
A production of EVD Media.